Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, she's in as Shiro, Michael. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This webinar is brought to you by Africa Judges and Jurists Forum in partnership with the Pan-African Lawyers Union, Institute for African Women in Law, and Africa Reparations Hub at the University of Free State. And we're happy to have you here. So as we know, March is the month for women, for celebrating women. On the 8th of March, we had International Day of Women. And then on the 10th of March, we had the International Day for Women Judges. And we thought it would be a great idea to bring in some of the different programs or themes we work on, which is reparative justice, which is also the theme of the year at the African Union, and our IJL program, which is on the independence of judiciary, and then bring those together with some partners to amplify the voices of women who are doing work in this space, women in the legal profession, women in judiciary specifically, and lawyers working along the lines of judicial independence and reparative justice, so which is why we're here. I'm going to quickly introduce our programs director, who would give us the opening remarks, and then we get into the rest of the programs, where then I'll introduce our speakers and co-moderator. So over to you, Dr. Justice, for your brief opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henrietta. You can hear me, right?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Chief Justices, judges, and distinguished guests. As some of you may know, Africa Judges and Jurists Forum is a network of retired and serving Chief Justices, judges, and jurists on the continent of Africa who are committed to promoting the rule of law and development. On behalf of the Secretary General of the AJJF, Martin Okum-Masiga, and indeed on my own behalf, it is my honor to welcome you all to this webinar, which is being held under the theme Accelerating Action, Women in the Legal Profession, Navigating Challenges, and Driving Judicial Independence and Reparative Justice. This webinar, as my colleague Henrietta mentioned, is being held as part of celebrating and commemorating the International Women's Day and the International Day of Women Judges. The International Day of Women Judges is celebrated annually on the 10th of March. This day was established by the United Nations to recognize the leadership of women judges and promote gender equality in the judiciary. The theme for the 2025 International Day of Women Judges is open quote, AI in the courtroom, women judges pioneering technology for justice, close quote. This theme focuses on the role of artificial intelligence in the judiciary and the contributions of women in this area. Both the theme for this webinar and the theme for the International Day of Women Judges place 4 issues at the center of today's discussion. And these are 1, equality, 2, justice, 3, judicial independence, 4, computational technology. In my view, honorable judges and my learned colleagues who are also joining us, there's a common thread that runs across these 4 issues. And for me, it is the impact of the rise of new forms of authoritarianism and how they undermine equality, justice, judicial independence, and how computational technologies such as artificial intelligence are used as weapons of democratic destruction rather than weapons of democratic construction and consolidation. It is my hope, and indeed AJJF's hope, that during this webinar, we will be able to engage with each other constructively and effectively on what role we can play to ensure that we push back against authoritarianism, and in doing so, we put the achievement of gender equality in the judiciary and society at the center of our efforts. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion during this webinar. Over to you, Henrietta.
Thank you very much for those welcoming remarks. And thank you for everyone who's joining us. I see the numbers are rising, so welcome, and thank you for being here. We are now going to go to the first presentation, which is coming from Honorable Justice Jasmina King of Sierra Leone. She is a board member of African Judges and Jurists Forum, and she's a Court of Appeal judge in Sierra Leone. One second, please. So for her session, she's going to be speaking to us on examining gender-sensitive judicial reforms and women's impact in judicial independence. As we know, an independent judiciary is important for society, it's important for development, for rule of law, and sometimes we see that women's efforts often go unnoticed, unappreciated. We know that women are contributing greatly to this space. And so we want to hear firsthand from a sitting judge who has given us the honor to be here. She's a in Sierra Leone, and she was also a former commissioner at the African Commission on Human and People's Rights between 2015 to 2022. She was a former commissioner at the Human Rights Commission in Sierra Leone 2006 to 2016. She's currently a commissioner in the International Commission of Jurists, ICJ and AJJF, appointed as the High Court Judge and the Court of Appeal Judge in 2019. Thank you so much for being here, Honorable Justice. To you. You have 10 minutes for your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henrietta, for introducing me, and good afternoon, good morning to everyone who is on this platform. It's a pleasure to be here, and I bring you warm greetings from Freetown, Sierra Leone, and I hope that I would not have challenges with the internet during my presentation. I am very grateful to the organizers to invite me to participate in this webinar in commemoration of International Women's Day and the International Day of Women Judges. Henrietta, can you hear me well?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay. Please permit me to celebrate and congratulate all women, particularly women in the law at every sector and level of our African communities. I particularly want to acknowledge our women Chief Justices, both past and present, as well as our women judges in Africa, women judges and magistrates in Africa. In my lifetime and over the years, I have seen a lot of women leading judiciaries in their respective African countries, and most of them have done remarkably well in developing independent judiciaries. I've also had firsthand experience of women leading international courts and tribunals. We have all benefited from coaching and mentoring by these great women. They are role models, they are mothers, they are sisters, they are friends. And we're truly grateful for their hard work and contribution to the stability, peace, and development of our nations. As I talk about women's leadership in judicial independence, I think of women serving as Chief Justices. That's the highest position in our respective judiciaries. But this is a single position, and it would be limiting to focus only on the holders of this office. The position of Chief Justice is a very daunting job, but I really admire the women Chief Justices I have interacted with from a number of countries who are really up to the task. Two things I admire the most is their ability to take others along and the ability to relate to the executive without being compromised. I see their passion to serve and to make a difference in their respective countries. I have to be honest and frank. I also see that job, the job as a Chief Justice, as a very lonely job, and often wonder about the strategies they use to cope when the going really gets tough. What price do they have to pay for holding those jobs? I think about the impact it has on their lives, including their families and communities. While serving as commissioner at the African Commission, I had to sacrifice a lot to be able to serve well in that job. I had a supportive family, but you really miss out on family events, children's birthdays, school events, and other events because I am away. But I also want us to look at not only Chief Justices, but women in the apex courts, our Supreme Court, Constitutional Courts, and Courts of Appeal. We must not exclude women in other courts, magistrate courts at every level, because they faithfully serve and uphold judiciaries. In all instances of women's leadership in our judiciaries, we have seen women driving the independence of the judiciary through judicial reforms, from rebuilding the institutions negatively affected by wars and conflicts, addressing corruption among judicial personnel, and introducing policies and mechanisms to build trust and confidence in the courts. And this is a continuous venture, building trust and confidence. Women have also been at the forefront in making justice accessible, particularly in rural communities, introducing mobile courts, digitizing the judiciary, spearheading progressive jurisprudence in all areas, addressing gender-based violence and discrimination, championing legal education, and much more. More women on the bench are having more impact in decision-making and the development of a feminist jurisprudence. All of these transformational reforms have not only demystified justice and increased judicial service delivery, but they have contributed in no small measure in reshaping our colonial, patriarchal, and male-dominated legal systems and judicial institutions. I cannot say that we now have a more diverse, gender-sensitive judiciaries, but we can see a pathway and know it can be achieved. In my country, in Sierra Leone, I think it was about 15 years ago, or maybe, yeah, about 15 years ago, we had a Chief Justice who was a woman, and 50% of judges were women. But as we speak now, it has gone down very low. So it's an uphill task, you know. An independent judiciary protects the human rights of citizens, provides access to justice and redress to its citizens when their rights are violated. It also enforces the law without discrimination, fear, favor, disaffection, or ill will, and ensures speedy resolution of disputes at all levels. An independent judiciary should also be diverse in terms of its composition, and without robust reforms, diversity in the judiciary can never be achieved. We all know, as Dr. Justice has said, the independence of the judiciary is under constant attack and threats. And I think we see it all around now more than ever before when we think about countries like Tunisia and many other, all of our countries, not only from the executive by their attempts to influence or even dictate judicial outcomes, but also as a result of the poor working conditions that we work under due to insufficient funds and just unsatisfactory working environment. There is also the lack of progressive, transparent, and inclusive policies in terms of appointment, promotion, and discipline of judicial personnel. But we also have to remember that the independence of the judiciary may also be threatened by financially well-off and influential private individuals and entities attempting also to control judicial outcomes. Corruption poses a serious threat to the judiciary, and there is this notion that women are less corrupt, which to a certain extent is true. But we all know that anyone can be corrupted. So there must be mechanisms and the will to address it as and when it occurs. There are serious security issues as well. Judges, including women, have received threats and have been killed in the line of their work. These are but a few of the challenges that affect judicial independence. Women's impact on judicial independence is not limited to judges who are at the helm of the judiciary, but it also encompasses lawyers and legal academics who are women. In recent years, I've been following the Institute for African Women in the Law, through their Women in Law and Leadership initiative and other activities. As Henrietta said, a lot of times we do not hear about what women do, or we're a very conservative bunch. But this has helped to highlight African women's in the law's contribution to their countries, but also to the challenges they face. They are currently actively promoting the adoption of the gender equality in law model policy, which is remarkable. They conducted a comprehensive study on women's representation in law and leadership in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Senegal. This is a must read if you want to know more about women in leadership positions in the law and in the judiciaries. And you can find it on their website at africanwomeninlaw.com. Their findings resonate with the situation in all of our respective countries. According to the report, notwithstanding the increase of women in the legal profession, women still have a long way to go in leadership. With the judiciary, women on the bench are increasing, but women in leadership are still low and uneven across the country and courts. And one of the findings they had was that women in the judiciary stagnate at the lower courts. And we can all think about some of why this is happening. But despite increases on the bench, women still face persistent gender-based challenges, work conditions, transfers. When you are transferred to a far rural community and you have to leave your family and you're given short notice without support, it's quite challenging. Sexual harassment, slow promotion, even though there are comparative differences like countries like Kenya who are getting more women in the bench and leadership. Female role models are increasing, but opportunities are limited for sustained mentorship, leadership training, which must begin early at law schools. And there's still a lack of feminist gender consciousness among women and within institutions, even within the judiciary. And there are other institutional challenges which affect women's ability to rise within the ranks. And these are also intersectional challenges that remain for women. Barriers to women's entry and rise to leadership and points of attrition for retention can be categorized, according to this report, at 3 levels: institutional, structural, and individual. With the institutional barriers, you have the norms, practices, rules at legal institutions that hinder women's leadership, including biased hiring, which I had mentioned earlier, promotion policies, unequal pay, sexual harassment, lack of mentors, and gender biases and stereotypes. With the structural barriers, we still have the sociocultural norms, practices, and stereotypes, such as systemic patriarchy, gendered norms, perceptions of women's leadership, systemic infrastructural challenges, pervasive sexism, bullying, and harassment. But then you have individual barriers. And when you look at the report, you can actually see that in some countries, because of age, gender, marital status, religion, ethnicity, and even caregiving, women face barriers in terms of accessing leadership positions, in terms of promotion, etc., etc. I want to conclude my presentation by looking at some of the recommendations that have been proffered, which I entirely agree with. Female leaders must be supported in their leadership journey to prevent them from assimilating into a masculinist institutional practices, norms, and mechanisms. It is so easy, if you are the only woman around at the top, to just follow the system that you meet. It's very radical for you to push for changes when these systems have been institutionalized and they've been there forever and ever. They are very systemic. There's need to develop policies to dismantle the multiple axes of gender-based discriminatory practices in the judiciary. We need to conduct gender audits to address gender gaps in hiring, promotion, and pay. Having said this, I've been interviewed once or twice in the judiciary in Sierra Leone. about, which was a gender audit, but I'd never been told about the outcome of those audits, let alone using the outcome into developing policies. Hiring of judges should be fair, transparent, and should ensure women have access to information in good time. There was a time when somebody, some group of female lawyers told me that we need to know when it's time to appoint judges, but sometimes you don't know. Even when you're in the judiciary, you don't even know. Sometimes it's shrouded in secrecy. We need to revise male-centered work policies and practices to accommodate the intersectional needs of women. We need to cultivate male allies dedicated to promoting gender equity and inclusion. And there's need to conduct continuous training on unconscious bias and microaggressions. And I need to state that this is not only for men, but I think as women, we also need it because we are also guilty of biases, even gender biases. So we need to be constantly reminded, especially those that are not so evident. We need to build strong networks, strengthen existing ones, increase women's voices through tangible programs to meet the SDGs 5 and 16 and other regional and international policy commitments. We need to embark on intentional and increased investment in leadership. You know, we can all be lawyers. I always say lawyers can be lawyers, but they are bad administrators. So, or they are bad leaders. They can be bad leaders. So we need to, we are not taught leadership skills always in our various law schools and law faculty. So we need leadership training and other capacity program and skills development for women in the law. And we need to invest in research and data gathering about women in the law and leadership. Finally, let me conclude by saying that constitutional and legal frameworks and even policies for gender equality and inclusion, whilst important, but they will not necessarily lead to independent, diverse, inclusive, efficient and effective judiciaries that we want to see in line with all of these regional, international, and even our constitutional laws and policies. We all need to multiply the phases of women leaders in the law, amplify their voices, and support them. We need to equip, empower, and invest in our women so that when they attain leadership positions in the law as magistrates, judges, and chief justices, they are ready, will enjoy it, and not endure it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Honorable Justice. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. We're taking notes, so we hope to come up with something at the end of this, and we'll definitely reflect some of the points you've made. Please check the chat box. You can send your questions in there, which would be taken at the end of all the presentations. So any questions or comments you have, please kindly put it there. I'm seeing some emoji reactions. Please keep them coming for our panelists. Yes, please keep them coming for our panelists. Thank you. So I'm going to move quickly to the next presenter since we are behind just by a few minutes. And so we are going to be speaking now on reparative justice. We've heard from the good judge on judicial independence, the challenges women face, and she's gone ahead to even give us the way forward, highlighting some of the work done by the Institute for African Women in Law, IWL, who are also partnering with us and are present on this call. And so I'd urge everyone to go check out the report and see some of the recommendations as the judge has mentioned. And so going into reparative justice, we decided to pair this because, like I mentioned earlier, this is the theme of the year at the African Union, and it is an important subject for us to understand some of the contemporary challenges we have now, and identifying how they can be dated back to historical injustices. And for this part of the webinar, we'll be looking at the role women have played in reparative justice, the role women are playing in designing and implementing advocacy plans around this issue. And for this, we have an expert, no other than Professor Catherine Namakula, who is the convener of Africa Reparations Hub that is based at the University of Free State in South Africa. She is a justice scholar, and she chaired the working group the UN Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent. She chaired that group between 2022 and 2023, leading missions to the UK, Australia, and most recently Colombia, investigating the plight of Africa's diaspora. She was also a delegate on the group's fact-finding mission to Switzerland, Portugal, and Norway. She authored Resolution 543 on Africa's reparation agenda and human rights of people of African descent and diaspora, and which was adopted by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in December 2022. And she's written a critique of the Germany-Namibia Accord on colonial genocide and has a spectrum of research work on the right to fair trial. Thank you so much for availing the time to join us today. And so over to you, Professor. You have 10 minutes, and I'll be reminding you at the 1 minute to go mark in a direct message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henrietta, and thanks to our participants who have made the time to really join us to celebrate women. And among those women that are celebrated is the preceding speaker or fellow panelist with whom I'm very, very privileged to share the panel with, Judge King, and who has really made very insightful submissions. I want also to thank AJJF for its continuing partnership with the Africa Reparation Hub. We're really very pleased with this, and also for convening this webinar together. My topic is a little bit different. Reparatory justice. Whenever we talk about it, many people on the African continent ask questions as to how relevant that is for the African continent. And perhaps I'm very pleased that this is purely an African audience, whereby we can discuss in-house issues in this year of reparation that has been declared by the African Union. This discussion also comes in the context of the renewal of the UN International Decade for People of African Descent from 2025 to 2024, following a previous one that started around 2015, in which we made significant gains, despite also setbacks, as have already been mentioned, that have actually been crowned by now the authoritarianism that we see. The pillars of this decade that actually tend to really anchor the entire conversation around reparatory justice, recognition of what? Of past injustices, of the marginalization of Africans and people of African descent in different spaces, including at the national level, at the regional level, and the international levels. How do we obtain justice for that? And how then do people of African descent or Africans also transit such by victimization and develop as a human race, as part of the human race? So the first question is recognition of victimization. Is there any victimization? And in the context of this particular subject we are discussing, when you look at women, victimization only comes at an intersectional level when it engages with race, intersectional forms of discrimination. You're a woman, then you're a Black woman, maybe operating in the regional sphere, maybe for some racially charged environments, such as countries, even on the African continent, that have racial dynamics or have an engagement of different races. Or even in the context of countries that are purely actually African-led, we see also racial dynamics coming in, but do we know how to identify that? That's another thing. But it's more evident at the international level. So I'll actually talk to some of the phenomena of victimization that may affect judicial impartiality in some way. And one of them is race-based negative exceptionalism. If you are a woman, if you are Black, you are likely to be encountered with the 150% standard of delivery, whereby you either deliver at higher than average or higher than full delivery, or you are not working. You find that if you apply to international organizations, you want to be a judge, you want to be a professional there, you're more likely to be taken on if you come from an Ivy League university, because it is assumed that Africans are not well educated. Yeah, your professionalism is also judged on sacrificing everything that you may want to do for career, such as family or even identity. We can see some of the examples, including actually one of the head of the Conservative Party in the UK, Miss Kemi Badenoch, whom I've had an opportunity to engage with, who's actually proving to be more white than white. So you find that that's what you're doing. And I really feel sorry for persons that find themselves in that kind of situation. Secondly, there's racial stereotyping, and these are automatic and exaggerated mental pictures that are held about all members of a particular racial group. That the assumption that Black people are criminals, the assumption that Black people have low intellect, or they are lazy, or they're actually parasites. You actually get to these organizations and they say that you are parasitic because your country is not contributing anything to the UN system. So there's a report on racial stereotyping that has been written by the Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent. That will give you more details. There is also the idea, and that's also tilts into the education system, yeah, where you find Black people are given as examples of certain characters, or even in the press, in movies. In movies, you find that Black people are likely to take on certain roles that depict negatively on the human race as opposed to others. And it also tilts into the media, negative press based on race. We saw this when Dr. Ngozi Okonjo took on her role as Director General of the WTO, a very experienced woman, and a Swiss newspaper reported that in an headline, actually, that an African grandmother had arrived to take on the job in The Hague. And we don't know what really triggered this, but of course we cannot really separate it from race. And the way she really self-identifies, she dresses in African clothing that is in a particular way. Maybe they're used to a power suit like that, and that's what they expect. And also we can see our colleagues in the judiciary, they have to wear the white wig on a Black judge, on a Black woman, which has never changed. And these affect the way people are understood and interpreted because the system wants them to be in a particular way, a system that was established long time ago. And it's traceable to the legacies of enslavement and colonialism. There's also racial profiling, and these are law enforcement practices of identifying individuals as criminals or criminal suspects based on perceptions regarding their race. And this includes stop and searches, selective controls. If you've been to Europe and other places, controls on public transport, they don't check anybody else. When they see the Black person, then they remember they have to check, then check, and they don't check anybody else. Then you're stopped at the airport, then you ask 1,000, and you do interviews at the airport because you're likely not to have gotten the visa the right way. There are also macroaggressions like visa denials. They give you short-term visas 1 week, sometimes denials after maybe the conference that you're going for has passed, then the visa arrives. We are also now seeing this indiscriminative travel bans, that certain countries will face travel bans. At this point, we saw that during COVID, when they actually closed off African countries, when actually the virus was discovered in South Africa, but its originality was in the Netherlands. So those microaggressions are large-scale systematic operations of a target group by society's institutions and governments. And you find them in education systems, you find them in the cultures of people, in law enforcement mechanisms. Those are macroaggressions. there are also microaggressions, and these are like everyday, subtle, intentional, and oftentimes unintentional interactions and behaviors that people communicate in some way in which they communicate bias towards a particular group or a historically marginalized group. You sit in a place, in a train or somewhere, and somebody stands up and leaves the place. So those are microaggressions. You are also likely to see intergenerational economic deprivation, mainly of African countries. If you're undertaking projects, research projects, or something like that, you'll find that you have less funding, your portfolio is less funded because of the alienation of African countries and generally Africans from global economic systems. And that we also see at the level of the United Nations. Our mandate for people of African descent, for example, has less funding than the mandate for sexual orientation. So it's not the same. You would not even have your core staff would be struggling to actually even support you in your work, as others have 20 and other staff and also standby institutions winning. So it becomes very clear that there is a certain pattern of exclusion of people of African descent and Africans from the flow of money and resources. And also there is an element of invisibilization of one's work and erasure of their contributions. Yeah, your work is not acknowledged as it should, and this may also come from phenomena such as the need for foreign validation. Yeah, your work has to be reviewed by some reviewers from where, and then they tell you to revise it and all that. That is one. There's also the deputizing syndrome. Women are also serving as deputy. I think my Justice King has really talked about leadership. If you're not in leadership, then that means your views will not lead. Somebody else's views will lead. So that also is one of the areas where there are problems. So with regard to the pillars of justice and development, what are the approaches that we may take? I think I would use this opportunity to call upon ladies and women in the legal profession to participate in reparations work in many ways. Henrietta is already one of the ladies that is standing in this particular movement, and I thank her for her work, but we need more. We need more ladies who are authors. We need more ladies who are actually able to appreciate the origins of racial discrimination, how it looks like, and can be able to drive forward the agenda to correct some of those at a personal level, and also where in their work, even as judges, even in Africa. And we can talk about how that can really be done. One is to increase their knowledge base. How can you conduct a racial analysis? How does racism look like? I've seen certain judgments here in Africa where people call others baboons, and the judge is not able to call that out. Yeah, so judges should be conscious about that. And I would also share an experience when I served as a consultant with the German Foreign Office in just 2020 recently. And then we were to have a high-level photograph with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So we are supposed to organize ourselves first before the minister comes. So we did, and the minister took a while to come. And as we were there, somebody of a particular race said that we should sing. And I knew what it was about, because they generally think Black people are noisy, they can sing at any platform. So this was a Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we're expecting the minister. And of course, some people who never thought about it as kind of a racist thing started singing. And I looked at it, how could this even happen? And when they started singing, it was One Love, and in a very official high-level environment. Then the person who asked actually laughed. So they had succeeded to fool everyone into some racist stand. So just also to protect yourself professionally when you engage at certain levels, to know how racism looks like. So In terms of cases, conducting racial analysis, able to call out racism. In many cases, it's not litigated, especially here on the African continent, much as there are some advances in the diaspora, not really fully, and even at the international level. We can follow the example of Judge Pili, that in respect to gender-based violence, she was able to discern from the testimonies of the Rwandese women who were not speaking directly. They had subtle ways of expressing sexual violence, but she was able to pick it up and say, let's investigate, let's have in-camera hearings, let's investigate more into what these ladies are saying, because there seems to be a particular pattern, but they're not actually being explicit about it. And that started the movement for gender-based violence. Every case, every investigation at the international level now, in all the tribunals, there has to be an gender violence analysis of the particular investigation or of the evidence to ensure that there was no sexual violence, because it's always in between the lines. Right. One other way is to write. For those who are judges, they have an opportunity to write, at least if they are not able to put it in their judgment. By curiam, they can make a note calling out racism and legacies of the past if they're identified. They can also call upon the executive to take action. Yeah, that can be put on by advocates from their judgments. And also for those who are scholars, there's lots of room. We have very tiny scholarship written from an African perspective that relates to reparation. Africa's entitlement to reparation or repair, entitlement to compensation for what happened in the past, including colonialism, including contemporary forms of extortion. We just had a case in Belgium where the Congolese women whose children were taken away, mixed-race children were just taken away from their mothers and taken to Belgium, and their parents left in the Congo, and they just won a case. And yeah, there's a lot of work that we can do, commentaries we can write, and really amplify our voices on that. Please belong to a support group on these issues. Join the women organizations that are actually doing work on this. I hope Henrietta will have a women's group on this, because we have met with the judges before, but women ladies to form something, a movement for reparations, we are still waiting for that. In terms of litigating, I think also we can see women litigate for reparation, in favor of reparation. We can see that happen. And we have a precedent. For example, it took Justice Unity Dow's case to change the landscape of women's rights in Africa. So if we can also see that come through, please decolonize yourself and learn colonial mentalities, the mentalities that Black is less, the mentalities that Black women are more dumb. Those ones, I think we need to throw them somewhere. Seeking validation from elsewhere, waiting to get a degree from Harvard before you can actually stand up and be articulate or stand boldly, that needs to go under the carpet. Also, it can help to build a personal media footprint. There are easy ways to express opinions boldly through the social media or social media handles. Thank you very much. I'm following quite a number of ladies, and I wish to honor them. I derive a lot of inspiration from judges, and I celebrate them today. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for coming here. Please, let's see the reactions, the emojis. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Prof, for that very insightful presentation. And I've definitely taken some pointers. Next steps, I hear you on having a women's group, or bringing together women who are working in this space. That's definitely something we could co-create. So thank you for raising that. And yes, there's so much work that can be done in terms of scholarship, in terms of activism. And as she's clearly highlighted, the gendered impact of historical injustices are numerous, too numerous to be numbered. Thank you, thank you. So now we're going to go to the last segment. So just to mention, we're supposed to have Justice Catherine Lome on the call, but she's bereaved and we send her our deepest condolences. So she's not able to join us to speak on judicial resilience and external interference for women in the judiciary. But we're going to hand over to my co-moderator, Luciana. Apologies, this first bit has taken a bit of time. Luciana is going to moderate the last bit of the conversation and then the plenary session. So I'm going to briefly introduce Luciana, who is a member of IWL and was sent to join us on this call today by IWL, the Institute for African Women in Law. Luciana is an elections law and governance specialist with expertise in gender justice research, renowned for her publications on elections and inclusion in Africa. She moderates international conferences on governance issues and has lectured at the University of the Gambia and Kabarak Law School in Kenya. She's a member of the Federation of Women Lawyers Kenya, the International Commission of Jurists, and Institute for African Women in Law. Thank you so much for joining us, Luciana. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Henrietta. Good afternoon, good day to everybody, wherever it is you're joining us from. It is a pleasure to be a part of this conversation today, and I'm very happy to be part of this celebration of International Women's Day and International Day of Judges. For this part of the conversation, and you will note from the program and the concept note if it was shared with you, we wanted, as part of the objectives of today's webinar, to identify the challenges that women are facing in the legal profession and to propose actionable strategies to overcome these barriers. Having identified these barriers, we are also hoping to foster partnerships among legal institutions, policymakers, and advocacy groups to drive systemic change. Just by way of background, before I introduce the panelists that we have for this session, after which we will open up for plenary, one of the things we noted from various studies which have been done on women in the legal profession and women in judiciaries is that in the recent past, we have seen an increased feminization of women in the legal profession. A part of that is because of an inclusive legal education system across many countries, but we've also seen an increase in career pathways within the legal profession, some of which have favored women, and so the numbers have really gone up in the recent past. Nevertheless, when it comes to women in leadership or women's leadership progress and their influence in decision-making, we have noted that this has not always been the case. We haven't seen an increase of the numbers of women in leadership. So, for example, if you look at private legal practice, there are fewer women being promoted compared to men. So if you look at women partners compared to male partners in Kenya, for example, you have a ratio of 40 to 60%. And it's the same for government institutions. If you look at the Office of the Attorney General, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we haven't seen as many women rising to leadership in these spaces as we would like. We've also seen fewer women rising to partnership roles. I've already explained that. But we are concerned about these numbers, not just because we want to see women in leadership positions, but primarily because there are instances where we have noticed that the presence of women in these spaces not only improves the face of justice, but it also reduces incidences of corruption and increases effective representation of various cadres of the society within those spaces. So we're seeing women entering spaces, but they're not rising to the top for different reasons. So for judges, we've seen reports of harassment, intimidation, and breaches of privacy. And there are diverse reasons for these situations. And it's the same for women who enter the legal profession. Yet, the presence of women enhances transparency, accountability, and the protection of human rights. So we want to understand what some of the barriers are to women entering the legal space, but also the judiciary, some of which have been highlighted by Justice King, and then look at what the opportunities are for promoting women's representation in these spaces. To take us through this part of the program, allow me to invite Ms. Esther Muigai Mnaro, And she's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, who works with the Pan-African Lawyers Union as a program manager in the office of the CEO. She has over 10 years of experience in legal practice. She is versatile and a well-accomplished advocate who has litigated both nationally and at the regional level, having litigated at the East African Court of Justice, the African Court on Human and People's Rights, as well as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. She holds a bachelor's degree in law from Kampala International University, Uganda, a postgraduate diploma in law from the Kenya School of Law, and a master's degree in the rule of law for development from the Loyola University. Esther, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes to make your presentation, after which we'll open up the floor to interventions from our other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christiana. That was so much sugar. I might just get diabetes, but thank you.
Esther. We'll give her a few minutes to come back on board. And in the meantime, we will be inviting all the participants to just place their questions in the chat function. Just indicate to us if there is a question or comment that you would like addressed to any of the panelists who are speaking today. And if possible, also indicate who you would like to address your question or comment. After the presentation, we will have a session for Q&A, and we would like to give as many people as an opportunity to have their question or comment addressed as possible. So if you have a question or comment from the two presentations so far, please feel free to put it down in the chat function. And as soon as this presentation is done, we will take your question or comment. Judge King also made reference to the work that is being done by the African Women in Law. And allow me to just invite you to also look at the website, africanwomeninlaw.com. Please visit the website and find out about some of the campaigns that the Institute is running, some of which will be of interest to the members here. See how you can be a part of the wonderful work that the Institute is doing in promoting gender equality and the various campaigns that are involved in that regard. If you have not had a chance to also look at the networks that are run by the Institute, this is also your opportunity to find out about the various networks that are run by the Institute and how you can join a particular network and promote the work that the Institute is doing. Again, just a reminder, we will have a Q&A session. Feel free to type your question or comment in the chat function as we wait for Esther to join the meeting.
Perhaps as a space filler, as we wait for Esther to join, I just wanted to add something we have also identified in addition to what you've said, which is hypersexualization of Black women. When you come into a space as a professional, then and you're active and you forward, then the other participants think you want to be kissed. You're looking for marriage. You need to actually be supported to have children so that you can find other things to do and stop being noisy. So that's just one thing I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Namakula. And while we have you still on the floor, there is a question that has come for you, and we can have this addressed while we're waiting for Esther to come on board. Mr. Cholgarang is asking that you kindly help him understand the meaning of reparative justice from your view, just so he's on the same page as you, as he's taking in what your presentation has been. Would you like to address his comment before we move to the presentation?
Thank you so much for that critical question and for the opportunity to answer it. This is acknowledging, we have already had an extensive discussion about recognition.
Yes, can you hear me? I'm sorry, my internet decided to misbehave.
Yes, Esther, we can hear you. We'll be with you in a moment. There's just a question that's being addressed by Justice Namakula, and then we'll come back to you.
Thank you very much. I hope I can become justice one day. It is actually acknowledging and addressing legacies of the past. And when we talk about legacies of the past in relation to Africans and people of African descent, we are talking about the 400 years of enslavement of Black people that led them to be commodified and really dehumanized in that way. We are talking about colonialism. We are talking about apartheid. We are talking about neocolonialism and contemporary forms of extortion. How do we get the effects out of the systems? Some of them are systemic, they're in systems, and some of them are in societies, and also some of them are perpetuated by us, by our own practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Namakula. My apologies. I did promote you to justice, and yes, your desire to become justice is valid. We look forward to that. My apologies also to Achol, who had asked the question. Achol is a lady. My apologies for that. I do hope you have gotten the response you requested from Prof. Namakula about the meaning of reparative justice. Since Esther is back on the call, allow us to give her 10 minutes to make her presentation, after which we will come back to the Q&A. Esther, if you can hear me, the floor is yours again. Please proceed.
Thank you, Luciana. And before my internet decided to embarrass me, I was just saying that I was texting Henrietta earlier that I feel as though Dr. Catherine and the Lady Justice had summarized pretty much of what I wanted to say. So what I did was try to look at the barriers in the legal profession in addressing institutional, cultural, and economic barriers from a regional perspective. And I started by looking at, for instance, what's the representation of female judges when you look at some of our regional courts. And I started with the African court, which currently has 5 female judges and 6 male judges. And that is not so bad, you would say. But then you go to the EACJ, which is the East African Court of Justice, and you realize that we only have 1 female judge out of 10 male judges. So there's 1 judge in the appellate division, 4 male judges in the appellate division, and 5 male judges in the first instance division. And then if you look at ECOWAS Court, there's 1 female judge and 4 male judges. COMMESA Court has 2 female judges and 3 male judges. That is in the appellate division. And the first instance, there are 3 females and 4 males. So in these instances, and especially if you look at it from the perspective of how the East African Court of Justice, for instance, has only 1 lady justice in a court that has 10 judges, you then ask yourself the question of, is this an indication of how it is even for female practitioners who practice mainly at regional level? And I would tell you that the answer is a resounding yes. We have a very small representation of female practitioners at regional level, and it's for various reasons. And I did not want to go back to what the previous speakers have, for instance, already talked about. But I just wanted to highlight some of the biggest issues that face female practitioners who want to practice before Africa Human Rights Mechanism. One is the fact that if you want to work in this institution, you would probably need to relocate from your home country. And with this then comes the fact that for a lot of women, we are the primary caregivers for our children. So how easy is it for a female to move as opposed to a male to move? Then you find then males get a higher advantage when it comes to hiring. The other thing is, if you look at how it is starting from our national level, it also goes up to how regionally women are treated when it comes to hiring. When I was a young lady starting practice in Kenya, hire a male than a female. Yet it is actually females who were more loyal, for lack of a better word, and would serve a law firm longer than the male who would always be looking for other opportunities. And this is because, I mean, when you're young, if you look at it from the fact that most of us are Africans, is you are also of childbearing age. So a law firm already knows that within 1-2 years, you've gotten your first job, you're going to get married, and then you're going to want children. And that means they'll have to give you maternity leave. And then 2 years down the line, you're going to do a second child, and you'll again want maternity leave. And if you want as many children as I do, I have 6 children, it means those will be 6 annual leaves in a span of, say, 10 years. And that already gives a disadvantage. And that also means that when we want to rise up to even move to, for instance, being judges at regional level, we are disadvantaged. It means out of every time that we take, for instance, maternity leave, it's 3 months gap in your CV that a lot of employers don't want to recognize. Again, when it comes to regional level, a lot of the appointments that are done are more political. but women, we don't play politics as most of the men do. So which means that we could just be competent, but then we don't get equal opportunities to get appointments to African human rights mechanisms. The other thing that I thought about was the fact that we also have the cultural aspect of it's the woman that is supposed to follow the man. So if you get a good job and you want to move, for instance, to work for the African court in Arusha, and you're based in Ghana or in Nigeria, as Henrietta is, then the question that will follow you is, okay, so me as a man, what am I going to do in Arusha? So when I was thinking of what recommendations or what should we do differently, I thought, for instance, we could push for models that, one, advocate for more policies that are women friendly. For instance, I could give an example. At PALU, we have a policy where women who have young children below the age of 2, you can travel with your child, and PALU will cater for the cost of the minder and the child. So you get to also get equal opportunities in terms of training and in terms of you even advancing your career. I know the UN, when they started the mechanism for the Rwanda Tribunal, they had a policy where they could give employment also to spouses of people who are moving to work for the tribunal, which meant then women also had that advantage of you can go with your husband and he would have something to do. There is also the need for us to have a push to have more competence-based appointments than political-based appointments at Africa Human Rights Mechanism. And that's why, for instance, as PALU, we have partnered with other organizations like RFK to come up with what we call the Arusha Initiative, which is pushing for transparent processes of how appointments are done at African Human Rights Mechanism. And we are of the opinion that this could give equal opportunities also to women who may not necessarily play politics, but are competent enough to be on benches at African regional level. Because also this is what inspires young women practitioners to also want to practice, one, at regional level, and to know that they could actually rise to be women judges, not only at national level, but at regional level. I remember looking at Justice Monica Mugenyi when I joined PALU about 6 years ago and thinking, wow, look at her. You know, I can actually rise to that. But if we do not have this exposure, then we have an almost purely male bench, then it means there are also no mentors, there are no role models that, you know, the young women who are practicing law at our national levels can look up to and know that I could rise to that. So in a nutshell, I would say gender bias starts across from national level and goes all the way to regional level. But if we can also have a system where we are our sisters' keepers. Unfortunately, you find it's women who normally fight other women. But imagine if we could have a system where if I'm a woman practitioner at regional level, I want to mentor 10 women, young women who are, for instance, in universities. It means in a few years, what we have now could dramatically change. And I think it's doable. And also to push for implementation of the policies that already exist. For instance, the EAC has a policy on gender inclusion, but it's not being practiced because if the EAC itself, the appointing authorities for the judges, have an almost entirely male bench, so it means they're not following their own policies. So we need to not even ask for new policies to be done. We need to first push for implementation of the policies that exist because we have a system where every time there's an issue, we think coming up with new laws is what is going to fix it. But we already have so many laws that if only they are implemented, if only the protocols we have are implemented, we could have a balance of what it is that we are looking at. Luciana, do I still have some minutes?
Just a couple of minutes to wind up and then we'll open up to plenary. Thank you.
So if we implemented family-friendly policies, it means more women would have more flexible hours, not just at law firms, but even in the organizations. Let's consider this in our budget that, yes, female legal practitioners may need more support than male practitioners, and it is okay. I mean, we are the ones who bring light to this art. So we also could do with a bit of a bump. So yeah, that's it for me, Luciano. I'll try to summarize it in terms of the regional perspective and without repeating what the previous speakers have spoken about.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Esther. I think a lot of what you've said echoes what Justice King had said earlier about some of the barriers that women are facing in the legal profession, including questions of negative stereotypes. You've also addressed some of the challenges, the gender-specific barriers that women face when they're trying to get employment or to rise in the ranks, and how having family-friendly policies is one of the ways in which we can facilitate women rising to the ranks in both the legal profession broadly and also in judicial service. We've also spoken about something which is important and which is something that the Institute for African Women Law also supports greatly, which is the importance of mentorship and modeling. It is very difficult to become that which you don't see. And you've spoken about your own experience with Judge Mugenyi from Uganda. And I know there's many other people who can point to a woman who they saw doing something exemplary in the legal space, and that inspired them to aspire to leadership as well. So the importance of creating platforms for mentorship and also for modeling good leadership as a basis for also enhancing women's representation in the legal practice, but also in judicial ranks. So I'd like to now open up the floor to questions and comments. And as I look through the questions and comments, allow me to also acknowledge the presence of all judges and jurists present in the webinar with us today. Allow me to acknowledge in particular Judge Monica Mbaru from Kenya, Justice Boise Mba from South Africa, and Justice Rolly Harriman, I believe, from Nigeria. We're very happy to have you here. In case we have omitted any judge or jurist, we acknowledge your presence and we are very grateful to have you be a part of today's discussion. Allow me to open up the floor now to questions or comments. If you have any question to any of the panelists, any particular comment that you would like addressed to them, please let us know in the chat function, and we will happily have your question or comment addressed in the last remaining minutes before the end of today's webinar. So any questions or comments, please let us know, and we will have those addressed momentarily. Okay. Allow me to also acknowledge Justice Sebutinde from the ICJ. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're very happy to have you here. I know that there's people who have had to leave the webinar in advance. Yes, the recording of the webinar will be available for those who want to go over the conversation. We are happy that you were able to join us. So yes, please let us know if you have any question or comment, and we'll have that directed at the respective panelists. As they're doing that, maybe Esther, because we do have a few minutes, and any of the panelists, please also share with us some of the opportunities that you see for fostering partnership in the area that we're discussing today, whether we're speaking about reparative justice or including the representation of women in the judiciary or in the legal profession broadly. What do you see from your respective spaces as the opportunities for partnerships and facilitating or promoting the increased representation of women, particularly in higher levels of leadership, but also in the regional and international courts, because that has been a consistent theme in today's discussion. So I will start with Justice King, because she spoke first, Justice Jamesina, and then we will come to Prof. Namakula, and then we'll come to Esther. So what you see as the opportunities for partnership, and any additional comments that you would like to make.
Thank you very much. And I want to again, having listened to some of the participants and attendees, I know some of them, I want to give them my warm greetings and to say we celebrate ourselves for the International Women's Day and International Day of Judges. Opportunities for partnerships. I think we should start with the very young. Nowadays, as I can see from Sierra Leone, you have even At school level, you have the human rights clubs, human rights groups. At the universities, you have human rights clinics, you have female law students association, and even at the bar, almost in every country, you have beside the Sierra Leone Bar Association, you would have female lawyers association, whether they're called FIDA, whether they are called lawyers in our case. But I think there's need to build capacity at that level, because it is one thing of having a Chief Justice or a few Supreme Court judges, but should they retire, as I told you, at a particular time in Sierra Leone, we had 50% of the women judges, but most of them have retired. There will be nobody coming up to take their positions. And the conditions of service, I think partnership also, we need to partner with judiciaries in improving conditions of service. Gender sensitive, because when we talk about conditions of service, yes, we have the usual. We don't have conducive office space, cars, we still write with longhand. But you need the other gender sensitive policies that need to be introduced, like policies against sexual harassment, mechanisms to address sexual harassment. You also need policies if somebody is working and that person has to be transferred, that person has to have, if that person has a family, you have to give that person time and support that person if you want to transfer that person from one region to another region. And there's so many other things that we can do, to help get to where we want to be. So I think partnerships from the very young, right, coming right up. Thank you. Maya, Commissioner Maya, how are you? And all my friends, I bring warm greetings to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice King. And I know there's a question that has come on the mentorship programs that exist. And so as we do our conclusion, please also tell us about the mentorship programs that you know about in judiciaries in the various African courts that you have interacted with, or even at the African Commission, just so we can share perspectives on where we can start with mentorship. You've spoken strongly about the need to start early. So we'll come back as you're making your concluding remarks. You can speak briefly about what the opportunities are when it comes to mentorship. Allow me to yield the floor to Prof. Catherine.
Thank you very much. I also wish to acknowledge the presence of Commissioner Maya and also my mentor, Dr. Rose Nakai, that actually mentored me when I was a very young girl at the age of 20 when I joined Makerere University. I think from the reparatory justice perspective, we have acknowledged that we actually were not educated about promoting or actually seeking reparation. The time we were, just because of the effects of colonialism itself. So we actually don't have the expertise, neither are we conscious about these issues. So one of the initiatives we have undertaken in collaboration with AJJF is to actually look at legal education and see how we are going to mainstream reparatory justice studies in the legal education curriculum. And we'll have a colloquium in May in regard to that. And if there are any law schools interested in that, please feel welcome to join us. Another comment I wanted to make is that numbers are very significant, but as I already mentioned about the case of the UK, what's going on right now, it's one thing to have women in positions or in leadership, and it's another thing to have pro-women, women who are pro-women in these leadership positions. So it matters very much how they think and what they stand for. Many of them actually turn against women. They turn against the Black race when they get to those top positions. And it's actually more difficult to fight a battle that is led by your own, who knows you so well and is actually divulging all your secrets to the other side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Catherine. Allow me to also acknowledge Commissioner Maya Sahil, who is a former commissioner of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Allow me to allow Esther to make her interventions, and then we'll have a final round of questions and closing remarks. Esther, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luciana. For me, when I think about areas of collaboration, I think of in terms of internships at the different courts. I know the African court, the EAPJ, always takes interns every year. So these opportunities exist for a lot of the women lawyers to get exposure. I also know the African court does training for African lawyers every once a year, and then you get entered into the roster. So, and then when they have legal aid teams, they use that roster to give the cases to different legal practitioners. So this could also be an opportunity for young women lawyers who want to get an experience in regional litigation to ensure that they attend the training and then they get onto the roster so that they could have that experience. For me, those are the two that come to mind.
Thank you, Esther. And I'm going to just do a final round of questions, and then we'll allow everybody to make their closing remarks. So as I said earlier, there was a question from Charmaine Pemberton from the Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm assuming this is Justice Pemberton. And her question is can you share more on the mentorship programs that exist in judiciaries in the various African courts? I wanted to give Justice King an opportunity to speak to this one, but there's also another question which has come directly to Justice King on leadership skills, and this is from Judy Mlongoti, and she asks, what sort of training, if any, should women acquire in advance to prepare for future leadership roles? So I'd like to yield the floor to Justice King to answer those, and then we will take a round of closing remarks.
Thank you for the opportunity once more. In terms of mentoring, we talk about formal mentorship, but then there are several other ways which I consider could be mentoring, even identifying one or two women who are doing well and just studying and following them, even on the web. You don't even need to meet with them. I followed, when I was a young girl, I followed a lot of people. They were not from my country, but I was just following them in the news. My dad used to listen to the news a lot, and I would follow women. Oh, that's cool. I don't want to call names because, but that can be one thing. But then insofar as the international regional mechanism is concerned, Commissioner Maya is here. With the African Commission, similar to what my fellow colleague had said, we do have interns through an AU volunteer program, and they do support the commission a lot. We benefit from them and they benefit from us when I was in the commission. And then you have training. The commission in its promotion work, it does training, and people could opt to be part of that training. But then the commission also has special mechanisms, committees, and people who are not commissioners could also be part of those mechanisms and committees. And I think whenever, if you're interested in an area, you need to follow what is happening in that area and get yourself plugged in, attending seminars like this. I see as one of the attendees, Justice Rolly Harriman. Justice Rolly Harriman, I only met her once at a meeting, at an AJJF meeting, but to this day, I can remember vividly when we were talking about case management, and she explained to me how she manages her cases, how she controls the lawyers and all of that. That is mentoring. And that was only for a short while, but I am using it up to this day, and I think about her. I can also remember when you work with people, not necessarily they're mentoring you formally, but you learn a lot from them. I've learned a lot from working with Commissioner Lucy Aswagbo, Commissioner Maya, Commissioner Soyata Maiga, and all these great women that I've met. So you can meet them, you can meet women both from afar, and working closely with them, you can develop those skills. You can look at them like, up till now, I always say, the protocols. Some people are so good with protocols, with diplomacy. You have to still learn. I was telling a colleague of mine, the other day, and I said that sometimes when you come into the judiciary, nobody even tells you, you're trained, you have introduction to the judiciary and all of that, but you have to learn a lot of things on your own. You have to develop your own strategies. I remember being called to sit in the Supreme Court, and I was like, I didn't know where to sit. I was so, out of place. But slowly, I told myself, because sometimes when you ask, it's not always people are ready to tell you, but you have to observe and adjust and be flexible, So these are all kind of networking. And with leadership skills, I always say that sometimes some of us, when we went to law school, we were like a captured audience. We were not allowed to speak. Now it has changed. So people need to even have the confidence to speak up. People need to have the confidence to challenge issues, and we are not taught that. So these are some of the leadership skills I think we need. And then dealing with understanding money. For me, my new passion is understanding money and knowing how to manage your resources. Because when we are in jobs where they don't pay a lot, we do the work because of our passion. At the end of it all, when we leave, we ask ourselves, what was I doing? Look at my colleagues, So I think understanding money and how it works also helps you with integrity issues, how to invest and all of that, those kind of things, how to relate with other people, your social skills and all of that. And hard work, just hard work. You also need to be able to tell people when you work hard, when you sacrifice. I'm just thinking that my colleague is here. If we're in the African Commission, even if they had allowed us to go with our family, I wonder how much time you will be able to spend with your family, because all the time you're working, morning, evening, night, you're working, But I think it's a good thing to think about families and how they can also, you can manage, balance work and family life. That also is a leadership skill that you need to know. And who you draw support from when the going gets tough and the tough gets going. These are some of the leadership skills I think we should look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice King. Allow me for a minute each to yield the virtual mic to Dr. Namakula and then Esther, just 1 minute each to make your closing remarks, anything you want the participants to walk away from this webinar with, and then we will hand the floor back to the AJJF team to conclude. So I'll start with Prof. Yes, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Luciana, for such excellent moderation. Mine would relate to reparation, of course, and reparation to Africa is something we must all confront because after the World Conference Against Racism, African states thought that if they took on development assistance, that would be a substitute for all their challenges. But where we are now shows that Africa is not even able to actually benefit fully from the advancements in humankind because of the systemic barriers on us as a race, barriers on us that are aggravated by also gender. So we need to actually step up our game and embrace measures for self-reparation, rid ourselves of those colonial actives or colonial perspectives, including wearing the white wig for judges, and also the way we are thinking. And we need to mainstream this in our education at all levels, at the family level, in the education system, and the like. You're welcome to join us. Thank you very much, ladies, for the opportunity. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you as well. And now the floor is yielded to Esther.
Thank you, Luciana, and shout out to my friend Ilham. Thank you for always joining this webinar speaker at. For me, I would say we need to tell more of our stories as women and in our own words, especially for women who litigate at a regional level and women who are on the benches at regional level. Even as the men tell their stories, let us tell our own stories, because this is what is going to inspire other young women to want to also litigate at regional level. And I mean, it means also we will have more advocates who have a gender perspective when they're making decisions and when they're litigating, and even when they're defending cases on gender issues. So for me, that's what I want to take away from this.
Thank you. Allow me to extend gratitude to all of our panelists. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for the examples you've shared. I've seen from the comments, a lot of people have resonated with the presentations. I have noted the compliments that have been given to all of the presenters. Please receive your flowers. Just a comment, I have seen a comment from Trinidad and Tobago, just noting that wigs were abolished in the Caribbean since 1976. So I guess there is a best practice that we can adopt just in line with what Prof. Namakula was saying. Allow me to now yield the virtual mic back to Henrietta and the AJJF team to close for us today. And thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you so much, Sienna, for the brilliant moderation. You always bring your A game to these things. And just to say, I'm just going to mention a bit of what Justice King said, you know, admiring women from afar. So take your flowers, because I've admired you from afar for a while now. And thank you for coming here and shining your light for the rest of us. Also, thank you to all the brilliant speakers that came on board. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the resources, the insights you shared. There have been some links in the chat box, so I'd encourage everyone to check them out. We have the link for IWL's campaign, going to their LinkedIn page. The CARICOM Reparations Commission work is also there. Please also check out Africa Reparations Hub, which is where Professor Namakula comes from, the hub that she convenes that does reparations work. So check them out. Also check out africajurist.org, which is the website for Africa Judges and Jurists Forum. And check out Pan-African Lawyers Union, PALU. They do excellent work as well. And yeah, so thank you. I'm just going to go over some of the key points that have come up. We've discussed challenges that women face in the legal profession. We've seen how women are in the judiciary, for instance, but more in the lower courts than in the senior courts. Issues of sexual harassment has been raised. The need to have more role models and systems that amplify mentorship. Mentorship came out very strongly in this conversation, and the need for having exposure and modeling for young women. And just again to the point on, you know, highlighting women that we see from afar. I saw Miss Osai Ojijo in the chat box, and I'm saying hi to her as well. She's one of the women that I have followed. I'd say 11 years ago was the first time I met her, and only met her physically this year, a month ago. And yeah, so it's possible to be mentored from afar by women you haven't met, but draw inspirations from their story, from their journey, and putting yourself out there, which ties into what Professor Namakula said, that we have to own our narratives, put our stories out, leverage writing, leverage scholarly work, which is one of the insights that Mr. Jijo had shared with me years ago, that as you're navigating your space, it helps to put out your work and people can recognize your voice and your contribution. So thank you so much. And another person to highlight, Prof. Japa Dawuni, who's the Director of Institute for African Women in Law. As we've heard over on this call, IWL is doing amazing work for women in the legal profession. They have the Gender Equality Law campaign that has been launched now, was taken to the AU, has been adopted by University in Ghana, and they're basically advocating for institutions, and especially legal institutions, to have a gender equality policy that supports women. Esther also made the point for women not being able to advance in their careers because, you know, they have children or have to move countries, and how it often comes off as a barrier where then they have a decision to make, family versus work, and ties into something I read just before coming on this webinar about women not opting out, but being forced out because they do not have the support system to combat some of these challenges. So I urge us to think critically about dismantling the gender biases, dismantling the structural challenges, institutional challenges that continue to affect women. And as we've heard on this webinar, women are doing amazing work in terms of judicial independence, judicial resilience, reparative justice, and the least we can do is continue to push for that support, continue to create spaces that amplify our voices. And so thank you again to everyone who's joined this and contributed. And yes, we look forward to speaking again very soon. And we'll take forward the conversation and take forward the recommendations, even as we shape our programming going forward. So thank you for the insightful ideas that have been shared. I wish you all a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, thank
Bye.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Henrietta, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Luciana. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to do this with you, Henrietta. Thank you so much for coordinating us so well. Thank you also to Elizabeth and the AJJF team. It was a fantastic webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, team.
Thank you.